If you could build the best U.S. men's national team roster right now, a 23-man roster, which players would make it and why? Hi, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV, and welcome to a series that we update you every 3 to 4 months on the best U.S. men's national team roster right now. So today we're going to build the best 23-man roster that the United States could put out at the moment, and I'm going to bring Pete from 11 Yanks to help us. We're going to have Pete's roster in my roster, and you can put in the comment section down below your roster. All right, everyone, we're back here with our roster update, as we always do here with Pete from 11 Yanks. We do 2 separate episodes, right? Here in Tactical Manager TV, we do an episode updating you on the best U.S. men's national team roster right now in our personal opinion. And you can let us know yours in the comment section down below. Then at 11 Yanks, which it might be out before this episode or after, we don't know. The order doesn't matter. On his channel, we actually look into what the roster might look like in 2026 based on what our beloved coach, Greg Berhalter, would do. This roster is not a Berhalter roster. It's ours, right, Pete?
No, this is what we think is right now. Like, if we had to pick a roster right now for a competitive game with everyone healthy, what would we pick?
Okay. We're going to have to assume healthy because when we're recording this, Gio Reyna is apparently not healthy again.
He's not fully fit yet. Yeah. But he still should be back before the start of the season, apparently.
I hope so, and then he'll be good for September as long as him and Greg are getting along. Just before we start, Pete, I'm going to give my roster composition here for everyone just so they can build it whatever way they want. Again, it's a 23-man roster because as far as we know, the next World Cup will be back to 2023, right, instead of 26. So my roster will be 3 goalkeepers, 3 fullbacks, 5 center backs, 6 midfielders, 4 wingers, and 2 center forwards. What will be yours? Do you have it there?
Mine is almost the same. I have 3 goalkeepers, 4 center backs, 4 fullbacks, 6 midfielders, 4 wingers, and 2 forwards. Now, we should clarify, we have not talked about this. Like, we haven't made our rosters together. This is brand new. Like, we're both just bringing this to the table. It'd be interesting to see how similar we both feel. I think probably mostly similar.
I think for the most part, it'll be similar. And even everyone that drops a comment in regards to it, it should be mostly similar. There's a lot of players in the U.S. men's national team roster just kind of selects itself.
That's the thing. About 20 out of the 23, honestly, are kind of a no-brainer at this point, in my opinion, right? Which makes it even bizarrer that, like, a coach cannot get that right. You know what I mean? Like, 20 out of 23, honestly, you don't have to think that much. And I haven't heard compelling cases for it. Like, there is, at this point, about 20 guys that if they're healthy, they're in that roster.
It'll be interesting to see in September when Greg Berhalter calls his first roster of this 2.0 era. And it's going to be a roster in a FIFA window. So every single player healthy will be available, which early in the season, a lot of them should be healthy right early on. But let's just dive into it. And I think one thing we can do to make it interesting is we can probably mention the next guy in line, right? Since some picks are so obvious. So why don't we start with the goalkeepers that we both picked 3. I think 2 are pretty much straightforward. They pick themselves. It's Matt Turner and Ethan Horvath. They select themselves right there. Right. Those are number 1, number 2. Number 3, that's one of those that, like, if we're going to pick the best roster right now, it kind of might be like Zach Steffen fighting with like Roman Celentano, maybe. It's probably those. Gabriel Sonina cannot be in the top 3 right now, in my opinion. If you're projecting to the future, maybe right now I wouldn't, unless you're bringing him into a roster to gain experience.
That's the thing. It's like, are you just making a roster with the future in mind? And so because the third goalkeeper doesn't matter, you bring him as part of, to be part of the group? Or is it like, who's the 3 best? I think, in my opinion, we're doing who's the 3 best right now.
Yes.
Right. Yes. So we have to go with that. So who's your third one then?
I want to keep Zach Steffen for now. I think Celentano was good last season and is being good once again. If I'm not mistaken, Cincinnati even leads the league, right, in points.
He has had a few mistakes, though. Last week, he had a pretty poor mistake. 3 weeks before that, he had another mistake. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
He has to keep up that form for a while.
He's also 22. For a goalkeeper, that's like an 18-year-old of a field player, right? Extremely young.
In some ways, yeah.
So Probably right now, if you were to just pick the best, is Zach Steffen, but he's very close to getting pushed out. It's not a pick that I love very much because talk about
Yeah.
mistakes. Zach Steffen was also like we talk about how Middlesbrough was good last season. Zach Steffen was not good. He was his defense was one of the worst in the league. They made it there because they scored so many. Right? Steffen
No,
made a
yeah,
lot of mistakes
exactly.
also.
I have Zach Steffen there also with an asterisk by his name because it's been about 3 years now of him not being good. Right, it wasn't good at City. It wasn't good at Middlesbrough, and has even been shaky. For the national team. So you have guys like Roman Celentano or Drake Callender. I mean, Drake Callender. I know Miami are bottom of the league right now, but in 22 games, Drake Callender has made 86 saves, right? And of course, there's different quality of saves, about 4 saves per game. I have not seen a lot of Drake Callender, so I'm hesitant to be like, oh, this is the guy, or to try to comment on his skill. A lot of people who I do trust have watched him and said there's something there with Callender. So he's potentially somebody that could be pushing. Honestly, Chris Brady is having a great season at Chicago, considering his age. I don't think he's getting quite as much hype as Slonina because Slonina was there first. But Brady's having a very good season for a 19-year-old goalkeeper. Looks honestly a lot more steady than Slonina did when he was there. That's just of the 10 games that I've seen. I've not seen
And you
all of
were
them.
at the game this weekend.
I was at the game this weekend. I'll talk about this more in our other video, but I'm very excited that Ezra Hendrickson got fired because they hired Frank Klopas, who's like a Chicago Fire legend. It's like they always turn to him when they fire someone. And so it's kind of like, oh yeah, here we go again. But he's got them playing out of the back. And so now Chris Brady is playing out of the back, which is what they didn't do with Slonina. They never hardly ever played out of the back. They're doing that with Chris Brady now, and that can only benefit. I mean, he's doing okay. I just want him to improve in that part of his game and to be playing regularly. So, yeah, I don't think any of them are ready to take that third spot. I still think it's Steffen, but I do think there's like one of them that's coming for him.
To your point about Drake Callender, now that Messi's there, I'm definitely gonna be trying to catch a few Inter Miami. It's not a priority, just to make that clear.
Sure.
I think it's
Yeah.
cool that Messi's joining the league, but it's not like I'm gonna change my schedule to watch Messi play in MLS. But I'm definitely gonna make an extra effort. I haven't really watched Inter Miami until they kind of just stopped playing Breck Shea. That was the only time I was actually following
Yeah.
them. But we'll see. Drake Callender is a player to watch. But as of now, let's keep it that way. Then Matt Turner, Horvath, and then Steffen. And hopefully we don't need to get to Steffen to play. Let's go
Yeah.
to the fullbacks. And you have 4, I have 3, right? I'm bringing 3 because one of my center backs can play as a left back, right? And he has played for his club. So I'll get to that when we get to that. My 3 fullbacks, it's pretty straightforward. It's Dest, Scally, and A-Rob, right? And to an extent, I have already a center back that can play as a left back, and I also have Joe Scally and Dest that could be an option at the left back. I don't love it, but there's just a very big drop off from A Rob to the other left backs. And
Yeah.
at times I catch myself thinking, I'm like, oh, could we maybe try Tolkien? Could we maybe just throw Caleb Wiley there and hope he develops? And could we just throw Dejuan Jones? I was like, nah, man, I'd rather just put Scally at this point. It's a safer bet. We've seen him play left back against teams like Bayern, and he did just fine. So those are my 3 picks.
Yeah, so I have 4 there, and obviously the 3 are the same. Wiley is my 4th, but again, he's in the roster. But like you just said, if something happened to A Rob, it would either be Scally, maybe Tim Weah, depending on the opponent, maybe Des. But yeah, he's there as the 4th fullback, but he's not necessarily the second choice left back.
Would you
So
say he is the best backup left back for A Rob right now?
that is tough. I would say maybe. Honestly, I don't think there's a clear front runner. I don't think Dewan Jones covered himself in glory at the Gold Cup. Wiley and Gomez, we've seen them at the U20 level, but not at the senior level. I think Tolkien is very average. I don't think there's anybody. Those 4 are the guys who you would think would make a case, right? And then you could maybe throw in names like Sam Vines or George Bello, but to me, none of them immediately stand out as like the heir apparent backup to A-Rob. So I've got Wiley there just because he's the youngest and is the most physically ready between him and Gomez. But I don't think it's that clear.
No, and it kind of, to me, it just gets to a point where I would just play Scally or the center back I'm about to mention, because defensively he would at least hold his own. So again, fullback, there's not much more to debate there. I guess one thing we could give a shout out is Brian Reynolds, that did not have a good Gold Cup, by the way. Brian Reynolds. If Scally and Dest are not available, Brian Reynolds is probably the next guy in line. I don't want to see DeAndre Yedlin anymore. And I especially don't want to see him with MLS, like trying to hype up that he's
Yeah.
Messi's
Did you see the
teammate.
new poster now? It's Messi, Joseph, and Yedlin. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go.
They're
Yedlin
gonna
forever.
they're gonna try to hype him just by
What
putting
we
him as
need to do
Messi's
is get
teammate.
Miami to trade him off so that they can't hype him anymore.
Send him back to Seattle.
Yeah. Seattle, anyone, like get a good right back so that we can not have, if anything, if you really want to market an American on your team, which is bullshit, by the way, it's not your, U.S. job, U.S. soccer's job to market MLS, but just put Drake Callender as the third goalkeeper. I'd rather that.
Messi's goalkeeper. Messi's goalkeeper.
This is Messi's keeper. So yeah, are you worried about that? Because I am.
Well, I am, because it's kind of like projecting into that, right? And I mean, he's Greg's guy. Greg really likes
Yeah.
him, right? Wasn't he in the whole leadership council, or
Yeah.
so. We're going to talk about Greg more on your video, because we're going to be projecting. So that one's Greg. This one's about us.
Yeah.
So, and there's other fullbacks to watch out for. Marlon Fossey had a good season in Belgium, just to keep an eye on. Not calling for him to be in the national team right now, but keep an eye on him. Might get a transfer, might get a move. But let's move on. Let's move on to the center backs, because I got five center backs, right? So let me go through my five, and I'm pretty sure most of them are the same as yours. Tim Ream, right now, that can change very quickly because he's very old, but Tim Ream, Chris Richards, Cameron Carter-Vickers. I would like to put Mark McKenzie. I'll put Mark McKenzie. I think he was consistently good in Belgium for a full season, finally, right? That's what has been holding me back on McKenzie. There's some concerns in terms of his height or physicality, even though I don't think he's that short. And we've seen short center backs be successful in the past. But Mark McKenzie. And then my fifth center back is Austin Trusty, for a few reasons. One, he can play left back, and he's played multiple games for Birmingham City as a left back. He is a lefty center back, which means we'll have two in the roster, right? Which is Tim Ream and Trusty. And I do the thing right now too. I want to mention this guy, but I didn't put him on mine. Right? It's John Brooks, because I think what is happening right now is, because we know he won't be in the roster with Greg, it almost seems like we shut him off, right? Not that we shut him off. We're just kind of like, we talk about it, but when we build a roster, you don't think much about Brooks, because you're just like, you lost hope about it. At the same time, I want to say one thing. I want to have Brooks back in the national team. The only thing I want to see before I call him back, which means he'll probably be my next roster, is I want to see him actually perform perhaps for a full 6 months properly, right? Didn't play for Benfica at all. When he moved to Hoffenheim, he was very shaky for the first like month and a half or so. And then he started to get it going, which is understandable. Now, if Brooks starts the season and he's the same way he was towards the end of last season, where he helped Hoffenheim come back, I am going to probably put him on our updated version of this video, which will be what, 3-4 months from now. But as of now, that's why I didn't include Brooks. I'm not Berhalter. I'm not excluding him. I just want to see him perform at that level for a longer time, because, again, didn't play for Benfica and looked very bad for Hoffenheim when he arrived. Then he got
So
it
how
going.
do you think Mark McKenzie would look for Hoffenheim is my question, or Austin Trusty?
I don't know. They would probably struggle too, maybe struggle the whole season. It's just very tough to say. Trusty was in a league that's more physical than the Bundesliga, maybe, the EFL Championship. Not as technical, right? Well, Brooks is very good on the ball. Mark McKenzie became a locked-in starter for a strong Belgium side in a league that's much weaker than Germany, but he consistently played all season long. I
I
think
feel like he
I'm
still
just
had a few mistakes last season, though. I
Oh,
remember
yeah,
a
he
couple of
did.
giveaways that led to goals. He wasn't like a lockdown center back for Genk
The
either.
more you No, he was a locked-in starter, though.
Locked in starter, but not as in like, reliable every single game. He was
The more
mostly good,
you
don't get me wrong.
Yeah, and the more you play, the more likely you are to make mistakes, right? John
Yeah,
Brooks
for sure.
barely played, and he made a lot of mistakes when he came back. But then after those mistakes, he started to look more like his old self, started to look
Yeah.
much more comfortable. So it was understandable that he struggled. The guy was 6 months with Benfica, and he played like a minute, right?
Yeah.
So maybe Brooks will be on the next one. So just to recap mine, it's Tim Ream, Richards, Carter Vickers, and those are the top three for me. And then McKenzie and Trusty, which I don't plan on playing them. I would maybe play Trusty if I'm trying to defend more, and he probably even place him as a left back if I need to defend. But those are the five that I would bring right now.
Yeah, so obviously the top three I don't think are even debatable. Anyone trying to debate those is crazy. And my fourth is John Brooks. He's a left-footed center back. He's still behind Tim Ream for me. But if I look at guys who can play there, so you have Miles Robinson, who cannot pass into midfield consistently or break lines with his passing, so that's a hard no. Trusty, I still think for me, the championship is fine. He was mostly good, but I do think Brooks is still a better player. And so I have him there. I have him there at 30 years old. I just think he needed the game time. And then now that he got it, I think he'll be fine. Doesn't mean he doesn't have weaknesses, right? I mean, you could still argue that in transition, he's still not the best, right? But it's like, this is a good question. Miles Robinson is really good in transition, right? When the ball's played in behind, he's
And
quick to
at
get back
volleyball
and
too.
clean up.
He's a very good volleyball player.
Good at volleyball as well. John Brooks, not so much, but John Brooks is very good at distribution, right? And not just distribution, but reading the game, et cetera, et cetera. What would we rather have? I feel like there's a large consensus of people who would still say Miles Robinson.
I guess one thing we have to look into here is this. In modern soccer, the center backs have to be ball playing defenders. I'm not asking them to be as technical as our center forward and our attacking midfielder, but they have to be able to play into midfield. They have to be able to make line breaking passes. And against Panama in the Gold Cup, we got exhibit A of what happens when both of your center backs cannot pass to save their lives, right?
Yeah.
We had Long and Miles for a good part of the game, right? A good chunk of the game. What Panama did was when the center backs had the ball, they just sat back. They're like, let these two scrubs have it. They can't do anything with the ball anyway. They're not
Yeah.
going to do anything. And that's literally what happened. And then, even though our midfield, our forwards were more talented than Panama for the most part, didn't seem that way. Our center backs couldn't connect. They have no technical ability on the ball. I don't care what people say about him. Now, in terms of defending, I think Miles Robinson does get the job done. And the volleyball jokes apart, that was one game. For the most part,
Yeah.
he's been extremely reliable in defending. Similarly to Zimmerman, even though Zimmerman, I think, is less reliable than Miles Robinson, the Mr. Reliable thing is a joke. Zimmerman in World Cup qualifying got bailed out with a mistake from the ref against Jamaica that everyone would have remembered. In the World Cup, the goal, he literally gave Wales a penalty kick. Not as reliable as people try to portray it. But I think we need to evolve as a soccer nation here, our culture. We need to want to have technical players, right? Not these guys that are tremendous athletes that can defend because they're tremendous athletes and they have good soccer IQ too. But we need these players that can play on the ball. Richards, Carter Vickers, Tim Ream, all these guys that are in Europe. If you are a no nonsense center back, which is more of like an old school center back, it's very hard to make it in any of the top leagues. You require a minimal degree of technical ability to make it there. That's why I think Miles has to go to Europe and challenge himself with that.
I agree. Speaking of Miles, I think we need to put a caveat on his name. Like, people put Miles quite high up there defensively, and that's understandable. But we've never seen Miles outside CONCACAF, right? This guy's net wasn't at the World Cup. He's played in MLS his entire career. It's like, at least with Walker Zimmerman, we kind of got to see what he looks like outside CONCACAF at the World Cup. And let's be honest, it was not great. With Miles, I feel like people are like, yeah, he's reliable. It's like, okay, he's reliable in CONCACAF, mostly outside of this Panama game. Yeah, he's reliable in CONCACAF. But do we really know what he's going to look like at a high level? Like, you know what I mean? That's why I think it's sort of TBD with Miles, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd definitely wait on that. I've got Brooks there, but I could hear arguments for Trusty or McKenzie, right? I think those three, in my opinion, are fighting for that fourth spot. And then below those three are the non-passing center backs, your Zimmermans and your Miles. That's kind of how I have it. Do you have it that way too?
More or less, yeah. I still have Miles ahead of Zimmerman, but the point you brought up
Same.
about playing at a higher level is something to consider too. Like
Yeah.
Zimmerman was actually tested at a higher level. I didn't think he was great in the World Cup, but again, we also know he's not horrendous, right? On it, right?
Yeah.
I know some
And to be
people.
honest, I think Jalen Neal isn't too far from breaking into the top 5 or 6, So
Mhm.
again, a passing center back. Like, and I think that's when our under 20s matriculate into our first team, it's over for the what do they call them in Spanish? The troncos.
The Troncos. Yeah, I think Jalen Neal 2 years from now it won't be the big, but not just Jalen Neal, right? Josh Winder getting a bit more experience. Hopefully Brendan Craig developing too. All these guys, it'll be
Justin
completely
Shea,
over.
Kobe Henry.
Yeah, and even though some of the ones we mentioned, like Trusty and McKenzie, depending on how things go in Europe, I know they're not as young as the ones we just mentioned, but maybe a year or two from now, they're even better and more established in Europe, and then you don't even talk about these guys, right,
Yeah.
anymore. But let's move on now to the midfielders, and I have six midfielders, which is the same as you, right?
Yes. I think we might
So
have the same six.
yeah, I mean, there's four that literally pick themselves. Like you don't have to debate. It's Weston McKennie, Eunice Musa, Gio Reyna, and Tyler Adams. Those four, there's no debate. They can't be out of the roster. And that includes for Mr. Berhalter. If he doesn't get along with Gio, better figure it out. Gio has to be in the roster.
So I would actually throw Luca into that conversation. I don't think there's a debate if Luca belongs on the roster or not.
Would you? What are the other midfield options we have? Let's think about it for a second here. Johnny's an option. Luca's an option. Malik Tillman's an option. To a certain extent, Taylor Booth can't play there. Brandon Aronson is also an option. We saw that against Canada.
Pulisic can
So,
play central.
because a lot these two of these that I mentioned, like Booth and Brandon, most of us will put on the wing. I do think Luca would be a lock in that situation, but I do see certain situations where Luca could be debatable with some players. But I do have him on mine, though. I have him on mine right now, just to
Yeah.
make that clear.
I just think Luca can play at the 6, the 8, or the 10. And he can do so with enough quality. It's not like he's a utility guy, but he can play them all well enough with his technical ability to be effective. So I have him. I don't think it's debatable, in my opinion, right now at least. Maybe that could change depending. Midfield options. We're going to have a luxury of midfield options in the future. If you look at that
Mhm.
under 20, under 17, groups. But yeah, so those 5 we have him. Who's your 6th one?
I have Johnny for now,
Same.
just so I don't have to play Musa at the 6, right? I can still have a more defensive midfielder to be the backup of Tyler Adams. I don't think we need Kellen Acosta anymore. I think we've grown past Kellen Acosta at this point. So Johnny would be my option, but I also was torn in between Johnny or Malik Tillman. It's just that they're completely different players and even position. Like Tillman would essentially be the backup to Gio Reyna. But the more I
Yeah.
thought about it, I was like, the wingers I have to play the 10, I could even have Pulisic play the 10. I could even
Yeah.
have Brendan Aronson that can play both. So at the end of the day, that's more or less what happened with me. I went with Johnny, but I was between Johnny and Malik Tillman.
I also think, like, depending on how this next season goes, that could change, right? Like, Paxton Aronson could have a breakout year for Eintracht Frankfurt, right? Or, Malik could be loaned out to the Bundesliga and have a really good year. Johnny, like, it's like there's room there between those last 2 positions. I have Johnny as well for the same reasons, because I know Pulisic can play the 10, Booth can play the 10, Luca can play the 10 to a degree. I don't love McKennie at the 10, but in a pinch, he could play there. So it kind of, that's how I have it as well. I have Johnny there because I think if something happens to Adams, I probably wouldn't play Johnny as a lone 6 just yet. Certainly not outside CONCACAF, but you could
Mhm.
play Johnny and Musa, right? Or
Yeah.
Johnny and
I,
McKennie.
I also want to say that Tillman, I do think Tillman is a player with a high ceiling, but he also falls under the category that we haven't seen him perform against good competition. We saw him
Not
beat up the very weak Scottish teams, and when it came to the good ones, like, well, I mean, just Celtic, he never performed. And that was like 4 games in the season, and Champions League matches he didn't perform. So I'm not saying I'm done with him. He's young, very
yeah.
talented, developed by Bayern, and he'll probably get a good move. And like you said, it can literally change 6 months from now. If he goes to like Eintracht and he's starting scoring goals in the Bundesliga, it kind of becomes a no-brainer. You need to have him. And he can also play
Yeah.
on the wing, even though I don't think he has sometimes the explosiveness to be a winger, but
I don't
he's
think he's
also,
a winger long term. I think
yeah.
either like a 10 or a second forward type player, which we don't really play with.
So we both have McKennie, Musa, Gio, Tyler, Luca De La Torre, and Cardoso for now
Yeah.
on the midfield. And then the wing, I have 4 wingers, and I think we have the same. It's Pulisic,
Yeah.
Weah, Aronson, and Taylor Booth. And Aronson and Taylor Booth are options also for the midfield. We
Yeah.
saw Aronson play against Canada, marking Alfonso Davies. That's one thing that Aronson's very useful for. Very versatile, works very hard, high soccer IQ. He just works, right? So those are my 4. I don't think, is there any debate there? I guess some
I
players
don't
could
think
come
so.
up.
I mean, some people might try to make an argument for Paredes. I think
Not yet.
Paredes is not quite there, right? Let's see how he does. If he goes out and wins a starting spot for Wolfsburg, okay, or even if he comes off the bench but regularly delivers goals and assists for Wolfsburg, I mean, it's a conversation to have, him versus Booth, right? Because I mean, everyone's very excited about Taylor Booth, and I don't blame them. I'm excited about it too. But let's be honest, he was good in spurts for, Utrecht last year, right? There would be spurts where he would look unplayable and then he got injured, slowly come back. You'd be like, okay. And then, even when he has played for the US, his crossing was a little erratic. I still have him as my fourth, but I don't think he's a lock. Like, I don't think it's like unchallengeable. I think that Cade Cowell or Kevin Paredes are like the pretenders to the throne. Zendejas slipped so far down the pecking order. It's not even funny with his Gold Cup performances. But yeah, I have those four, but I do think that could change if, Paredes has a good season with Wolfsburg coming up.
Yeah, I'll keep it with Booth too. I think Kevin Paredes still has a lot to prove. That's the only issue, right?
No, I agree. I mean, I would argue so does Booth. Like, I think he had
No,
sort of a good season in
Booth does, but
Eredivisie.
Paredes was like, he had some important minutes, but most of his minutes were garbage time minutes. Most of them, right?
No, he played mostly 20 or 30 minutes off the bench every week.
No, but a lot of them were games that sometimes were 4-0, right?
I wouldn't call it garbage time, but I would say, yeah, I mean, 20 to 30 minutes off the bench. Let me look, actually, because I know he played quite a few minutes last year.
I think right now the thing is, it's like Brendan, Pulisic, and Weah are those three that are locks right now for the wing, right? We're going to talk about Brendan for 2026. That can change, but right now they're locks. The number 4, as of now, it's a slight lead for Taylor Booth. There's even a case to be made for Sargent to be like a fourth option on the wing, because he can also play center forward.
Play in midfield.
Can play center forward too, or play. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with those 4. It's actually a good question for the viewers right now. What would be the wingers you would bring? Like, you guys would bring? I know everyone would probably bring Pulisic, Way, and Aronson. Who would be your fourth option? The best one right now. It's not projecting to the future, and all of them are young. Actually, they're all young, so it doesn't really.
Yeah, they're all very young. I mean, Pulisic, you can argue, is going to be 25 in September, but that's still, not even in his prime yet, right? So,
center forward, we have 2, right? We're bringing 2, and it's Balogun and Pepe. I don't think it's much of a debate. And then my number 3 would be Sargent, but we're not bringing 3, right? We're only bringing 2. So Sargent would be the next one. Jesus is probably the 5th or 6th or 7th. I don't even know at this point.
So who do you have above Sargent? I mean, after Sargent, but above Jesus?
You see, I think maybe Pifak. I know people are going to hate on me for this, but the guy is playing in the Bundesliga, struggling in the Bundesliga. He was playing in the Swiss league, and he was dropping also 20 goals and scoring in the Champions League. But he's in a team, and he's also in a very good team in the Bundesliga, very competitive team that made it to the Champions League. That's the main thing. It's like people talk about Jesus. Would Jesus be playing for a Champions League team? Would he be getting a lot of minutes? Would he just be a guy off the bench? Yeah. So, and even Haji, I know a lot of people rate Haji more than myself. I haven't liked what I've seen from Haji so far. So I would actually have Pifak right now as the, what is it, 5th option or 4th option?
Probably have Haji there at 4th. That doesn't mean I rate him. It's just if I had to choose. I just think Haji's a little more mobile than Pifak. Pifak's lack of mobility is kind of a worry, But if you played Pifak, I think I'd play a second forward with him, maybe play him with Balogun or something. But yeah, I'd have Haji at 4th. I'd probably have Pifak at 5th, and then Ferreira at 6th.
I guess if it gets to a point where we're playing the 4th center forward, we're already in trouble by then.
Yeah, I don't think any of them are good options or great options. Like, I think I'm comfortable with the top 3, and then after that, it's just like,
Yeah, also I saw an interview today of Jesus on the MLS All-Star game, and he was talking about how the dream is to go to Europe, and it's just like, dude, you're 22. You got to kind of like push your club and maybe accept an offer at some point. You got to make it happen. Or even lose some money, make a little bit less if you want to actually challenge yourself. Otherwise, sooner rather than later, you're like 24, 25. Your development age is gone, and then you're going to Europe, and it's going to be very tough, and you're used to MLS. It's not going to work out. At some point, he has to change. But again, Jesus, we just have to wait. Anyhow, that concludes this video. Y'all can let us know in the comment section down below what's your 23-man roster right now. Not what Greg Berhalter would do, what you would do right now. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Don't forget to check the other episode. That one's in 11 Yanks, and that's the one that we project to 2026, what Mr. Berhalter will do. Thanks for watching. Drop a like and have a great day. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.